Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Tailoring Talk, where we weave together the threads of fashion, culture and the ever-evolving world of entertainment. I'm your host John. I'm joined with Alex here as well, but no Bobby. Hello Alex.
Hello, good evening.
Bobby is busy feverishly uploading and editing videos tonight, so we're going to have this chat without him. We are going to dive into a topic that's been making headlines and stirring up quite a bit of conversation, which is Amazon's acquisition of MGM and the subsequent takeover of the James Bond franchise. Obviously, we were going to talk about this after all our Bondathons. We have kind of touched on it in previous podcasts and videos. But for those of you that have been with us for a while, you know that we previously explored the intricate relationship between fashion and film, especially the style trends of Bond himself. We've delved in the past into the sartorial elegance of James Bond, dissecting his timeless appeal and the meticulous craftsmanship of his wardrobe. Today, because we haven't got Bobby here to help us with all the wardrobe information, we're going to shift our focus to the business side of Bond, which is a move that could redefine the future of this legendary spy. So let's start with the basics. So back in 2022, Amazon made headlines by acquiring Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM. And they did that for a staggering $8.45 billion. This deal wasn't just about adding a vast library of films and TV shows to Amazon's portfolio. It was a strategic move to bolster their streaming service, Amazon Prime Video, with premium content. Let's now fast forward to February of 2025, time of recording pretty much. And Amazon has now taken full creative control over James Bond, the James Bond franchise, which is a property that's been under the meticulous care of the Broccoli family for over 6 decades. So Barbara and her half-brother Michael G. Wilson have been the torchbearers of the Bond legacy, ensuring that each film maintains the character's core essence. Their stewardship has been marked by a careful balance between staying true to Ian Fleming's creation and adapting to contemporary audiences. With their decision to step back and focus on other projects, Amazon's acquisition marks a significant shift in the franchise's direction. There has been a whole spectrum of reactions, Alex. Former Bond actor Timothy Dalton has expressed his surprise recently. He's quite keen to preserve the original essence of the films. Fans and critics alike have voiced concerns, drawing parallels to other franchises experienced shifts in creative control. One good example here is, of course, the big mouse taking over Star Wars, which underwent significant changes after its acquisition by Disney. So there's been obvious debates about the impact of corporate influence on beloved series. We'll talk about potential changes. There's 4 main things here, Alex. All right, hear me out. Let me know what you think. See if you think you agree with this. There's the increased production frequency. Are we going to see a churn of more stuff? Are we going to see an expansion into television? Are we going to see a diverse casting choice going on here? Are we going to see more non-traditional Bonds, more inclusive portrayals of the spy? And finally, I think the big one is, how is this going to integrate with the streaming services? So will we see simultaneous releases in the theatre and on Amazon Prime? Are we going to have a kind of change in viewing habits? So they're the 4 things I think we can really dig into. But I think it's the fact that it's not just about Bond. Amazon's kind of this whole buying of this franchise, this beloved franchise, is kind of symptomatic of a larger trend of tech giants integrating within the entertainment industry and controlling content and distribution and which platforms they're consumed. So, and this is something that I think Barbara was worried about from the last press releases we've had about her interesting relationship with Amazon, shall we say. So, let's start off with what the first, I think, bullet point here, which is this a good move or is this a risky bet? What do you think about that? The whole paying $8.45 billion, was it purely for Bond or after something a bit bigger, do you think?
So I think Bond was one of the big reasons to have the MGM name. I mean, there is obviously a good back catalogue, but Bond was one of the key ones. But it always felt like it was a bit of a love-hate relationship between them and the Broccoli's. And it didn't result in any additional any
IPs.
additional production at all.
No.
The only one that possibly happened, particularly probably straight after the 2022 sort of acquisition of MGM, was the Road to a Million, I think it was called, with Brian
Oh
Cox.
yes, that kind
And
of was it like a celebrity hunt type thing? Or
yeah, it was
yeah,
like it was a TV show, and they were basically a treasure hunt around the world.
I haven't yet watched that. It's
It
really
was
good. Have you
quite
seen
good
it?
to watch, actually. Yeah, I've
Oh,
seen I've seen about 3 or 4 episodes. It was okay, but there wasn't a reason to keep watching, if that makes sense. It's lovely
mm,
to watch, but and the what it did is it took you through some of the places of Bond, which I thought was a good way of doing it.
mm,
And arguably that's probably something that they could get away with quite easily, because they didn't touch the James Bond property itself. It was just the areas and that kind of thing. So, but that's the only output. Apart from that, you had No Time to Die, which was coming
yeah,
coming anyway, and then that was it. And it just completely stalled. So I think they'd reached a bit of an impasse. And I think Amazon will want to milk it for as much as they can, because it's a huge amount of money to invest. They have reasonable good grounds on producing films and material from IP.
mm.
So there's Rings of Time is one that's still going, and there's they
Rings of Time. Do
saved
you mean Rings of Power?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Rings
Because
of Power, and then there
and
was
there's
a
the Wheel of
second one,
Time,
wasn't
isn't there?
there? Wheel of Time, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
I get them confused because
Well,
they're very different, but they just smush together in my head.
you could call them the Rings of Time and combine them, couldn't you? That'd be an interesting series.
Um,
It's a bit confusing.
yeah, exactly, but they kind of blur together in my head.
Yeah.
But and they did rescue. It's worth mentioning they did rescue the Expanse. So
Yes.
and that was although sci-fi is very different, that was a good move from Amazon's point of view.
The
So
problem.
I think
The
go
problem with
on.
the Expanse thing is I think is it only the last 4 seasons that are on Prime. The first 2 are on Netflix. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
So you
It was
can't.
sci-fi that had it
Yeah, I
originally.
don't think you can get hold of the first 2 seasons on DVD or Blu-ray either, can you? Because of
Uh,
purchase. I don't
Gosh,
know.
I've just checked.
Because
I think they do have the whole series now.
they do.
I think yeah, they do. They do, but it's being removed in 5 days. So
Is that Prime or
yeah,
Netflix?
yeah, it's coming off of Prime.
Oh man.
Season 1 is.
Yeah.
So and this is the problem. It's like it's a real pity, because it's a really good episode,
Yeah.
a really good series, and we'll talk about that another time. But the thing is, what they did is they took a flagging TV series that had run out of money, and basically did that big injection of money and just said, go out and produce it. I think that the thing with Bond is going to be quite different, because they might end up going down the same route as Disney have, of overdoing it. So that's a risk. That is a big risk.
The big risk is them diluting it, essentially its core essence, the Bond essence, which would be a real shame. So yeah, I think the question I want to ask is, because obviously something happened. I know we had a news story between about halfway between now and the last time we had some news from Barbara Broccoli about her choice words for some of the Amazon executives. Between then and now, there was some chap, I don't know if it was in Dubai or Saudi Arabia, who was basically pursuing the rights to own the content of like the Bond's IP for certain aspects. So, for instance, things like lunchboxes and things, because there's some legal requirement for the IP to have been used regularly in all these aspects. And it looked like he might have had a case. And I think, I wonder if, I mean, there's other reasons I think this might have happened, but I wonder if both Amazon and the Broccoli estate got a little bit nervous about this, and so they've gone ahead to try and speed things up. This could be pure speculation, but it just seems weird timing, doesn't it?
So Joseph Kleindienst was the property developer who basically said, "Well, look, if you're not using this, then you will
lose it.
You will lose it," and that's quite a common thing with certain properties. It doesn't really count, because they own the whole rights to it. They don't just have a timed clause or anything like Sony did with Spider-Man, for example.
They've changed those laws, haven't they, as well, going into public domain now, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think his case was pretty weak, but I think what it was doing is it just spurred this moving on, because I felt like they just reached an impasse with the Broccoli's and Amazon. Amazon are obviously pushing quite hard for their own agenda, whilst understanding that there's creative rights with the Broccoli's.
It seems such a turnabout, doesn't it? Don't you think?
It does. I do think like Barbara must have capitulated and just said.
Do you think
Michael must have just said, "That's it. We've
Uncle
had
Jeff
enough."
walked in with a big suitcase of cash and said, "Look, you've got to want to retire soon," because I think Michael G. Wilson's retired now from anything, isn't he?
Yes.
I don't think Barbara has, but he's retired. Here's a big box of cash. Give us Bond, and you can, you're sorted for the rest of your life. Which they probably already are. Surely, I don't know what
they are, but I think there was a figure of around $1 billion or something ridiculous. So I mean, it could have whether that's true or not.
Yeah, I mean,
but Amazon could do it.
Yeah,
because they could just say name a number, and they just go, all right, this much, and they go, oh well, that's cheaper than what you paid for J.R. Tolkien, so fine.
Yeah,
and that's it. So so I think they must have come to some sort of conclusion there, and Amazon just had very deep pockets for this kind of thing. But it's so you're absolutely right. There's like loads of risks there. I do think it's kind of it will potentially unjam the works.
Yeah,
because while the Broccoli family have stewarded the franchise for a really well for all the time we've known it, I just feel like there wasn't an incentive for them to do more Bond, and I think that's the thing. It's kind of it felt like. They had a view and a vision, and that's the only vision they're interested in. So it'll be interesting to see if Amazon takes it in a different direction.
I think it's inevitable that when a new voice takes over, things change. However, the Bond fans like ourselves and earlier from 4 or 5 decades ago we're a different bunch to newcomers, and it could be that. There'll be themes that will appeal to a different generation that could be, maybe the times do need to change. Okay, let's think about the future of Bond in terms of the cinemas and streaming content. So do you think Amazon will push for Bond films to be released on Prime Video first as a sort of a bonus extra subscribing? Or do you think the cinema releases will be the gold standard first?
I don't think they will go to streaming first, because the thing is that, over the pandemic, the thinking was that streaming would lead to all sort of expansion, and would work really well. But what we've seen is that yes, that has worked to an extent, but there's a lid on it, and there's a top amount, and so even like players like Netflix are kind of looking to extract more money because they've thrown so much at content that they're not making as much out of it. And I do think that like the traditional cinema release for a property like Bond does make a lot of sense. It's just it may not be the only thing that we see. So because that's one of the things is Bond was solely around the theatrical release. And then the Blu-ray and DVD release, there was nothing else. There was no supporting. There was no, there's some back behind the scenes, featurettes and stuff. But it was always to support the Blu-ray and the commercial releases. It was never done for any other reason. And that's the thing that Amazon can bring in, because Amazon can say, well, look, we can run this at the same time. We can do a build-up. We can do behind the scenes things that could be released to Prime members, and I could see that working quite well. And they've got that great back catalogue, so this is it. They've got that catalogue of the Bonds.
Do you think
so? You could easily see that coming back.
See, I've been happily buying each Bond film as we've been watching the Bondathon. Do you think that Amazon will allow the films to be purchasable on other platforms like Apple TV or Google Play when they've got all the video content? They'll have to, won't they?
But don't forget, they'll make money on that. It's just
that's true, yeah.
And they'll probably charge the other platforms a little bit more, because the thing is, for Amazon, their distribution costs are minimal now.
Yeah.
So
they'll be cheaper to buy on Amazon and more expensive to buy on Apple TV.
Yeah, or they'll just stick the rate at something like £15 or something to rent, and they'll make like £15 of that, and then Apple will make £2 or £3.
They're 30%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Apple will be like ha 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 ha, and then Amazon will be like, yeah, but we made it, so we make the bulk of the money, thanks.
Yeah.
So I do think that, and they could even do like a release. That's where the business side of it comes in, because I suspect there's going to be some quite hard conversations between players like Apple and Amazon around this release, because I think really it's only Apple that could potentially shove Amazon around and say, no, it's a release at the same time as it's on Prime, or not at all.
Well, I mean, but Amazon will have the power to veto, and therefore they'll be able to lead the negotiations in terms of finance, won't they, and cost, I imagine.
Yeah, well, exactly. Or they could just gorge Apple for it, because ultimately you've got two very rich companies. So, they can. It's ridiculous, really, because the amounts of money that are going around, it's just insane. But yeah, so I can imagine it coming out, and then later on it will come to Prime first. And I don't think, obviously, it won't go to Apple anyway. So I definitely think there's still value, even if you just go down the traditional route, because they're the distributor now and the producer at the same time. So they cut it in several different places. So yeah, so for Amazon, it's a win-win, right? It's very similar to, and we'll talk about this in another pod, but it's very similar to Microsoft doing Call of Duty and selling it to PlayStation. It's like, everyone goes, wow, how could you do that? And it's like, well, people want to pay money for our games. Yeah. So that's fine.
It's like Forza coming from the Xbox, isn't it, to PlayStation? That was a big shock to everyone.
That's right, yeah. So I do think, the thing is, we've got this view of
them and us,
Bond and 007 as being pristine and in almost in a garden. And I don't think that was ever true, but I do think that, like, now it's more likely to come out into lots of places, because Amazon will want their investment back.
And does the consumer win out of this, do you think?
I think they'll win in terms of the content, but I do think there's an element, and this is something that's worth you thinking about, the creative bit. Will it be the vision that we think of Bond as? And it's obviously franchise. Yeah. But also it's at Bond's at an interesting time anyway, because it's, it needs a reboot. It's time for that. There is no other way. It has to have a reboot. And it's been, reinvented before, but it's always been very close to what it was in many respects. It's always had differences, but it's always kept very close to that. And I wonder whether they'll play it safe
for a while,
still make loads of money, or whether they'll open things up a bit more. And I think they'll probably have more. I think they'll have more flexibility around the additional content, like TV series and things like that, because I think those are areas where you could see it working. And they'll be wanting to do things like, so John Wick's a great franchise, for example, and they'll be wanting to do an example like that. So so let's talk about that, because that's a great example of widening the franchise.
I'm just looking up, because I use an app on my iPad called Call Sheet, and Call Sheet is like a purer version of IMDb.
Nice.
Because I just wanted to find out who the director was for The Continental. It's Albert Hughes. Because I think, actually, of all the technology companies that took over Bond, I think there's quite a good precedent here. Because have you seen The Continental?
I haven't. I've
really
seen...
good. It's really good.
It's good though.
It's really good. Yeah, it's a prequel. It's the early days of Winston Scott. So Ian
Oh, nice.
McShane's character from the John Wick films.
Yeah,
A young Winston Scott played by Colin Woodall, who's very very good in the role.
nice,
Um, and it's basically the story behind how Winston took over the Continental, the one we know from the film. Um,
nice.
and it has kind of Penguin vibes to it a little bit as well in terms of sort of like the early mafioso, but not quite as in depth as that. But it's really glamorous, but well fit. I mean, it fits in with the rest of the franchise really well. And obviously, we've got the ballerina coming out very soon as well, which I'm looking forward to seeing. So I think that does fill me with a bit of hope. If they can get someone like Albert Hughes, and the crew. I think Charlotte Branston was also a director. I'm not sure what else that they've directed. They've worked on The Rings of Power, and they've worked on things like The Witcher as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, there's some The Book of Eli, which is Albert Hughes' one of his films, and From Hell, Dead Presidents, Menace to Society. So some good background for the directing team. So I think we'd be lucky if we can get the quality we get from the Continental on a Bond TV series, and the themes are so similar. I would love to see, and here we go, speculation, a 1920s style Bond series. Or go back to sort of the 1960s, 1950s.
Go back to the original,
yeah, because
where it's set. Yeah,
well, exactly. Well, if you look at if you go back and listen to our Bondathons, From Russia with Love, one of the early films. It was one of our highest rated films in terms of style and content. So, it's that'll be really interesting. But you could see spin-offs like a Moneypenny series or a Q. I mean, a Q series would be excellent if they get the right cast.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd be off the charts there and trying to spot the gadgets. And
I'd love that.
But
yeah, totally.
So yeah, okay. Well, let's we'll put that to bed and just think about that for a while, because there's a lot of speculation about what TV series.
Don't forget that there was plans to do a Jinx spin-off, wasn't there, with Halle Berry?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, it was written
a long time ago.
Yeah.
It just never made the right day.
No, which is a shame, really.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it's one of those things that it's one of those things that actually we really do want that wider world.
Yeah.
It's just got to be done sensitively, and I think there are good signs and there are bad signs based on, if you look at like what happened with Star Wars, for example. So there's some really poor episodes and series in Star Wars, but then there are also a few highlights
really good ones,
that hold it up. Yeah, exactly. And Skeleton Crew is a really funny one.
Yeah,
but it's also it's an interesting one because it almost is a throwaway. Yeah, it is a throwaway series, but actually it was pretty good. And that was an interesting one where actually like cynics could lay into it and just say, oh, it was a waste, but actually that's fine because it was an enjoyable thing. I don't think that Amazon could ever go that far with that with the series. I think that this is why they still have to have a clear story. It's just that maybe looking at supporting characters or the wider world, delving into Felix Leiter would be great. And
I want the Adventures of Jaws. A whole series based around Jaws. That would be awesome. Jaws and his girlfriend with the pigtails. His sidekick. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love the automobile response unit that has to pick up the cars that always get broke and then exploded. Just like, where is it? Oh, damn it.
Yeah, that would be
Another
awesome.
write-off.
Okay, so
that'll be fun.
Let's talk about. Okay, we'll get to the big hot topic about actually casting 007. Now the big kind of speculation is now widened because before Barbara Broccoli had a rule of the type of Bond that she wanted. She wanted someone in the mid-30s who was British and white. No, that's not true. Not necessarily white, but British in the mid-30s. So there's the usual Idris Elba, Henry Cavill, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, but I think would they cast a female Bond now that they've got a bit more control over it. So I don't
So
think they will, but
I
what
don't
are your
think they
thoughts?
will.
No.
So the interesting thing is, and this will come on to the people, but Florence Pugh was mentioned in the Moneypenny Diaries, and that was that's just only recently
She'd be
rumored.
perfect.
And the thing is, it is a case of essentially just this change unblocks a lot of things.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to what Amazon want to do and what they could do. But I can't see them going away from a
Central films.
I'd say traditional Bond, but what I mean by that is the role of James Bond being similar to what it is now, in a different context, in a different time, in a different place, maybe. But I do think you would keep that fairly similar, because
It's not like it's the MCU where you can go to parallel worlds, is it? Let's be honest. It's not. It's not. Nothing's going to happen like that. You see, so.
And you've got to bring the thing is the problem is you've got to bring viewers across as well. So that's the thing. If you did something too different, then obviously the danger is that people just go, that's not Bond, and don't watch it, and then it becomes a flop, and that would be a big miss for Amazon. So I think they have to play it safe, but it is quite playful. It was interesting because Jeff Bezos tweeted about it, and just completely lit up the Twitter on it,
the fan
just
boards.
Completely with everyone was just going off on, oh blimey, right, we better get our one in, and there are some favourites that come up, like the normal ones that come up. Henry Cavill gets voted for everything pretty much. I think there's a real challenge with some of these because the age is going to be an issue.
Well, it's going to take them at least another 2 years to get this made, isn't it? At least.
That's right, and they don't really want someone that's in their 50s, because they need to inject some youth into the series, and particularly if it's a reboot, maybe, and it does go back to the 60s or 50s, like the books do, then you need to inject a bit of youth into that. There's a few others. I've got Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's Bookie's favourite apparently. I mean, I think he'd be very good. James Norton was suggested. I'm not sure he would fit, but it's certainly an interesting one. And the youngest one they've got is Harris Dickinson.
I think he would be very good. He isn't.
No, I didn't watch that. Was it good?
So, see, Harris Dickinson's quite a versatile actor. I don't think The Kingsman's his best film by stretch.
Right.
By far stretch.
Okay.
But he's what did I watch him recently? I'm just looking, just doing a search now. He was in a film with I think it was Léa Seydoux, which is interesting because she's obviously been in Bond before, called The Beast.
Right.
Which is a very how do I describe it? Kind of bizarre, hard. It's a multilingual film. His languages are excellent. So straight away he's got a grasp of foreign languages for being Bond. I think his acting roles have been so diverse that he's kind of coming through as a proper actor who can, like a chameleon. Does that make sense?
Yeah. He's in currently he's in
Baby Girl,
erotic thriller, isn't he? Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman. So that's an interesting one. Yeah. That range is quite interesting, really good rather than just being stereotyped.
The Triangle of Sadness, which is a very strange film, but it was very good in that. He was a love interest in Where the Crawdads Sing as well. Right. His southern accent was just perfect. So he's very good at accents and so on. So very versatile actor. The only problem I foresee, especially for young actors, especially for someone like Harris Dickinson, who's played a lot of different roles, is you're going to get that challenge of being typecast or stuck in that role for years, which must put certain players in this area off, really.
Yeah.
However, on the flip side, look what it's opened up for Daniel Craig.
Oh yeah.
So it's a real
completely reopened balance. His career up, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he had a great career already, but it was just he always wanted to do different things, and this was the mainstream that the one that he
yeah.
picked.
For Craig, I think
And
Layer Cake got in the Bond role, really. But
yeah.
Okay. Well. Again, we will not know for a long time. There'll be some leaks and there'll be some news articles coming up, but we won't know for a long time. Let's just before we finish off, we're making this a bit of a shorter podcast because this is like a bonus podcast for fans.
It's all speculation.
It's all speculation. But let's finish off because obviously we need to circle back to what is the essence of tailoring talk, and that is the Bond style. So let me ask you this question and see if you can answer this, Alex. So Bond style has always been sharp and timeless. Could Amazon's broader reach influence his look with more commercial collaborations? So will they, in terms of there's always been product placement from Sony in terms of tech, but also in terms of the clothing he wears. The worst case scenario is Amazon starts dressing Bond up in certain outfits, which they can then put links to via Amazon for people to buy, in their streaming services. But would he wear streetwear or tech wear? Would these new outfits dilute his iconic aesthetic? Do you think they need to keep hold of that really stylish essence of Bond, or will they loosen up a bit? Do you think? I don't know.
So that's an interesting point, because when you see Craig's Bond, for example, it was it's contemporary because it's based now.
Yeah.
And so what that meant is that you could show things that are out or coming out. So then all of the partnerships could be relevant, and I wonder if you could do that with a reboot that goes back. I mean, I definitely think you could, but I think it'd be trickier. It'd be like you'd be looking for more classic apparel and classic things. But I absolutely think it's going to happen. It's just it'll be no different than it did before. It's just going to be tied. It's just going to be promotional stuff. I don't think that bringing stuff into the films and the shows will happen as any more than it did already, because I just think that what used to happen was it used to be surrounded, like the release used to be surrounded by so much promotional activity and supporting things that didn't really matter where what you were thinking of buying, whether it was perfume, a watch, or a suit, BMW, or anything, or a BMW, or even a mobile phone. They would find a way to, and then of course the bit that you have is Bond, selling it essentially. But that happens outside of the story. That's always the advertisement bit, and so I think that won't change. I can't see it changing, but it's going to be present because Amazon aren't going to say no to promotional activity. That's what they live for, basically. So so expect to see that a lot, and of course a lot throughout Amazon as well, which is the interesting one. So you're going to have a lot of promotion in Amazon about the new activities. So you won't be able to miss it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one final question before we finish off. In 5 years, because it's like being an interview, isn't it? In 5 years, Alex, where do you see Bond under Amazon's ownership? Bigger, better, or a shadow of its former self? What do you think?
I have to be optimistic because otherwise it's very depressing. But I have to see this as in an optimistic light, and I think about what happened around the Bourne trilogy, where it all of a sudden injected a bit of pace and a bit of action into what was a fairly, it was becoming a bit stale. And I just have to hope that this will do the same thing. I think it has to be done carefully, and that's the only hope, is that Amazon do that carefully. I think they've also got the benefit of doing this late.
Learning
I think
the
if they were
lessons from
doing
Disney,
this,
you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If they were doing this across the pandemic, for example, then I would imagine that we would have the same kind of things that Disney have made, and we would all be shaking our heads, going, "Why did they bother with this?" So I do think that less will be more, but it's got to be better than none at all, which was where it felt like, because it just stopped. and then it stopped before, but it's just it really really felt like it stopped when
It's the
Amazon
longest
bought
stop,
them.
isn't it? Joint
Yeah,
longest.
so I do think that like this is a good thing, even if change is scary and it might not be feel the same. Um, that's normal. Like every Bond, a new Bond brings its own flavor and their own things. And I'd be really interested not to have a contemporary Bond. So I
Yeah,
think
me too.
that's a thing for me.
Vintage
I
Bond would
think
be
that
really cool.
yeah, I that I absolutely love because the Kingsman series, while it was fun and obviously it's not the caliber
No.
Of Bond, and it wasn't meant to be. But it was really fun. But it was again, it set itself. It wasn't contemporary, and so it didn't have to compete with things, and that was really good. And I think I'd love to see more of that.
Well, I mean, Apple dabbled, didn't they, with Argyle as well, which was okay.
Yes.
It was fun. I mean, all these films, Kingsman and Argyle, have some really, again, really amazing set pieces in them. There's the skating in the oil sequence, which I'm sure was lifted from the transporter, and there's some really great video compositing and action work in the Kingsman, especially in the cafe sequence towards the end of 3. Above all, what this does mean, though, Alex, and this will make us all very happy, is at some point we can record another Bondathon podcast.
Yes,
because there will be, hopefully, and potentially we'll be discussing the spin-offs as well when they come along. So it's great for us. I mean, it'll be hopefully a new kind of era of Bond for us to talk about, which should be great.
Yeah, I'd love that. And we already have the palette cleanser of Mission Impossible that we're working way through. So this could be that by the time we work through it, we have a idea of what's coming. Still going to have to be a bit patient. I don't expect to see anything until 2027, I assume, because it takes time for this kind of thing.
It's a long time. It's a long time to wait. Well,
yeah, next year seems like so far away, but in this kind of thing, it would just couldn't work because it takes 12 to 18 months just to set everything in place, and that's the minimum really. So. Yeah, I think 2027 is the earliest we'll be seeing something, but hopefully maybe that will be something shorter because then there's better ability for that to be turned around. So we'll have to see.
Have to see. Well, as we navigate this new chapter, Alex, in the Bond saga, one thing is certain: change is inevitable. Whether these changes will honour the rich history of 007 or take the character in a radically new direction, that remains to be seen. As fans ourselves and enthusiasts, we'll be watching closely, hoping that the essence of Bond, his charm, his wit and his style remains intact. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Tailoring Talk. If you've got any thoughts or questions about today's discussion, feel free to reach out either via the text, make a text via the podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, in the comments below. I'll say the inevitable. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave any reviews if you enjoy our shows. But until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and check the room for all exits. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
See you later, folks.